My name is Michael Hattori. Welcome to my instructional video on basic Marudai technique. I started learning kumihimo back in 1979 at a place called the Domyo School in Tokyo. And my first lesson, their emphasis was on technique. That is specifically for Marudai, how you pick up and pass the Tama back and forth across the mirror. Now if you think about it, this action is what actually forms the braid. So if the way you handle or pick up the Tama is inconsistent or unbalanced, then what you're going to end up with is an inconsistent and unbalanced braid. So my aim in this video is to show you the proper technique for handling the Tama. Since kumihimo has spread outside of Japan since then, it's become a very popular form that most people learn from the disc, which does not teach you the proper way to pass the Tama on the Marudai. There are books that have excellent photos that show this, but I think it's much easier if you actually see how it's done. So I hope from this video you will learn how to do just that. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing I'm going to show you is the basic near to far, far to near, north-south orientation kind of pass. So picking up the threads nearest you, you always pick them up only with your fingers, and as you can see when they come up, their Tama are dangling freely. You don't want to pinch the threads between your fingers like this, let the tension off like that. You want the Tama to hang freely so that they can pull. They're what are exerting the tension for you, not your fingers. So again, when you lift up, let the Tama hang freely. When you get to the 12 o'clock position, now you're going to change the position of your hands. That is, you're going to rotate your wrist toward you like this, duck your thumbs underneath until your thumbs are through the threads. Then you let go of them as you come down on the opposite side. And again, you can see dangling freely. You don't want them, you don't want to hold the threads like this when you come down. You want the Tama hanging freely like this. Okay, let's look at that again. So near side, pick up with your fingers. At 12 o'clock, rotate your wrists, dock your thumbs, and let the Tama down with your thumbs. Coming back the other direction, you're going to pick up threads with your thumbs. Again, letting the Tama hang without any tension other than what they exert. When you come to the 12 o'clock, now you're going to reverse, duck your fingers underneath, rotate your wrist towards you, and change to your fingers. Again, no touching. When you come this way, you don't want to hold the fingers or hold the threads with your fingers like this. You want them just to hang from your thumbs, transfer to your fingers, still hanging, and bring them down. Again, from the far side, lift with thumbs, transfer to fingers, and bring them down. Now the transition at the middle is what takes practice, and you're going to have to sit patiently for 15, even 20 minutes and practice doing nothing but this. And the important thing is that when you transition, that you not let the tension off of the threads like this in either this direction or this direction. You don't want to end up doing something like this. So when you pick up, duck your fingers under until they're transferred like this, until they're transferred. You may want to just stay in the middle of the mirror and work back and forth like this until you're comfortable with the transition. And eventually you'll get to the point where this becomes seamless and you don't even have to think about it. Now that takes some time and a lot of practice to get there. And it's actually worth your while to sit before you start braiding every time, just to get your arms warmed up, shoulders warmed up, and get the motion in your brain, just to sit and move back and forth like this. It's kind of meditative, and it sets your brain in place to use the proper technique every time you pass the Tama. So the next thing is passing from side to side. You use the same technique, and regardless of which side you pick up on, you always start with your fingers. So we'll start on this side to begin with. So you pick the Tama up with your fingers. When you get to 12 o'clock, again, what you're going to do is slide your thumbs under, transfer the Tama to your thumbs, and let them down, hanging freely. Now on the opposite side, you pick up with your thumbs, and you're going to transfer to your fingers, hanging freely again, and down. Lift with fingers, transfer to thumbs, and let down. Pick up with thumbs, transfer to fingers, and let down. Fingers to thumbs, thumbs to fingers. Now this is another one where you want to sit and just go back and forth until you can get to the point where you do this without having to think about it, and it's a nice smooth motion like this. Now if you're doing a braid where you start on the other side, then you pick up with your fingers over here, transfer to your thumbs, and let the thread down. Then you're going to pick up with your thumbs, transfer to hands, and let down. Fingers to thumbs and down. Thumbs to fingers and down. Again, you may find one side easier than the other depending whether you're right or left-handed, and that will just take practice. The other thing about handedness is that generally if you're strongly right or left-handed, you're going to find that you're going to exert a little more pull with your dominant hand than your non-dominant hand. This is something that's very difficult to overcome, but you can with a lot of practice and being aware every time you move the tama about how much tension you're exerting. The other thing about that is that you must keep your tama even. If you end up with tama like this, one hand is going to end up actually pulling because the tama is so close to your fingers. You're going to end up pulling much harder with one that's short than you do with one that's just hanging. So it's absolutely essential that you keep your tama at the same level, and if you have to stop every few rounds to do that, it is necessary to keep your braid even. So you can see when they're even, you have the same amount of thread and you're not going to end up pulling hard on one side or the other. So the next movement is in opposite directions, a single tama in each hand in opposite directions rather than in the same direction. So again, if you divide the mirror in half, the top half of it is the far side, and you always pick up with your thumb regardless of which position it's in here. If it's on the top half, you pick it up with your thumb. On the bottom half, with your fingers. So you're going to pick up one thread with your thumb. Say we're doing kongo gumi. You'd pick up this thread in this finger with your thumb, and this thread with your fingers. When you get to the top now, this is the more difficult part, is that you're moving your hands opposite. So rather than in concert changing from thumbs to fingers, one is changing from thumb to fingers, the other is changing from fingers to thumbs. And place it down. Again, lift. Sometimes it's easier to change one hand than the other, and let it down. The opposite direction or the opposite hands, left hand has thumb, right hand fingers. When you get to the top, again, switch, switch, and down. Switch, switch, and down. And you want to get to the point here, again, where it's a seamless transition back and forth. Nice and easy. You can see the tama are not swinging back and forth, they're not spinning, and that's ideal. Sometimes you can actually use if they do spin when you pick them up, you can stop the spin by touching it with your finger. And that's important too. Most braids, unless you're intentionally putting spin in, you don't want the tama to spin, otherwise it creates uneven areas in your braid again. So now if you're doing this on the diagonal, again, as for kongo gumi, you would pick up a far thread with your thumb, near thread with your fingers, thumb to fingers, fingers to thumb, and down. If you're doing the opposite, here you have your left thumb, your right fingers, and you switch at the top and bring down. Coming back the other direction, lift, switch in the center, and down. And again, sit for a good while until you feel like you can do this in your sleep, basically. When you reach that point, then you know that your braid is probably going to be very even. So, I hope that gives you an idea of the basic techniques of near to far, side to side, diagonal. Go back and practice, and I guarantee your technique will improve.